And we had mentioned on Tuesday, Sweden and Finland were considering membership into NATO. Today, Sweden's Defence Minister, Peter Hultqvist, says his country would consider the option of joining the military alliance, and that a group led by Foreign Minister Anna Lindh would report on the options in May. Sweden's ruling Social Democrat Party, which has until now rejected membership of NATO, is reviewing its international security policy in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Social Democrats, the biggest party in parliament and who form minority government, have consistently rejected calls to join NATO, arguing that military non-alignment has served the country well.
This has also in Sweden created a situation we have that we have started then a new security analysis of what we should do. We should in a group under the leadership of the Foreign Minister Anna Lindh, we are now analyzing all security options for Sweden. NATO membership is one of the options, but there is also other options we will analyze. We will come with a report in the middle or in the end of May, how we should do in the future. The reason why this happened is not Finland's, what they are doing. The reason is what Russia are doing, that they have started a war in Ukraine. That's the fundamental thing, 100%. They are the bad guys. They are doing the bad things that we have to react on in some way.
Joining us now to discuss this further is Sweden's ambassador to Nigeria, Ambassador Carl Michael Gräns. Thank you for joining us on the program today, Ambassador.
Thank you for inviting.
Where does Sweden stand, Ambassador, in the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I mean, we have condemned in the very strongest terms this military aggression and invasion. First time since the Second World War that a European country invades another country. We're still in a state of shock, I would say, in Sweden and the entire Europe of the Russian aggression.
And what type of support is, if any, is Sweden providing to Ukraine at this time?
Well, I mean, Sweden has been supporting Ukraine for a long time. Since independence in 1991, we have supported about 400 million euros in different ways throughout the years. But of course, with the Russian aggression and invasion starting on the 24th of February, we have stepped up considerably, I would say. And for the very first time since 1939, we have offered and given weapons to a country in a military conflict. Last time that was to Finland in 1939 when they were invaded by Russia at the time, that is the Soviet Union. But now we have given 10,000 anti-tank weapons to Ukraine. So, and of course we step also with financial support, 50 million euros to the Ukrainian armed forces. And then, of course, for humanitarian aid, just about a week ago, the Swedish government earmarked, so to speak, 1 billion euros for humanitarian aid, not least for the refugees now coming into Europe and also to Sweden.
Ambassador Gräns, does Sweden intend to join NATO?
Well, we all just listened to the Swedish Minister of Defence, Mr. Hultqvist, saying that we are considering different options at the time. In very close cooperation with Finland. As you know, the Prime Minister, Sanna Marin of Finland, is in Stockholm, the Swedish capital, today. So both Finland and Sweden have a history of being neutral and non-aligned. And now we have to very quickly make a new analysis of the situation, because the situation is completely new with this war going on, horrendous pictures and videos that we get from Ukraine. So we have to make an analysis of this, also together with the opposition parties in Sweden. There's a broad discussion, I would say, in Sweden at the moment about joining NATO or not.
But does Sweden consider what Russia is doing in Ukraine, Russia as a threat to Sweden's existence as a sovereign state?
Well, for the time being, we can't see any, existential threat to Sweden or to Finland for that matter, I think, but things can change so very quickly. That is a lesson learned, I think, during the last few months. So we have to prepare for every outcome. And there have been threats, oral threats from the Kremlin to both Sweden and Finland to prevent us from joining NATO. Very unclear, but, there would be repercussions if Sweden would join the NATO. So we feel the pressure, but the decision is ours, as the minister said. The government and the parliament and the Swedish people.
So one of those threats, of course, that you're mentioning is the one from the Kremlin, which has responded to the possibility of Sweden and Finland joining NATO. And I know that the Finnish Prime Minister, whom we'll listen to in just a minute, did talk about Finland deciding in the next few weeks, over the next few weeks, about whether or not the country will be joining NATO. You don't think that the Russian government could carry out the threat of, also targeting Sweden and possibly Finland in light of, this information, the possibility that these two countries could be joining NATO, despite everything Mr. Putin has said about NATO expansion in the East?
Well, it depends on how you define threat, because you can threat in different ways. Military threat, military invasion, no. We can't see that happening, I think. But we have seen cyber attacks in Sweden and in Finland. There were some drones all of a sudden very close to Swedish nuclear power stations just a couple of months ago. So we can see the signs, someone is telling us that don't do this. And then, as the minister just said, we have to make this decision on our own. But in close cooperation with Finland. And they are in the same position, of course, being neutral since the Second World War.
There's so much going on in Ukraine at the moment. Mariupol is almost going under and could be falling to the Russian forces, according to reports that we're hearing. And, all the deaths that have happened, the destruction in Ukraine. Some are wondering if it is time for NATO really to send forces into, boots on the ground into Ukraine at the moment. Do you think that NATO can face up to Russia? Because I know that the fear here is that this could, blow up into Third World War.
Yes, I shouldn't tell because Sweden is not a member of NATO. You have to ask the NATO countries, actually. But, when we listen to State Secretary Blinken, he has been very clear, I think, that NATO or the US does not want to be dragged into a bigger conflict. And that's why NATO so far has refused to protect the airspace of the Ukraine, very much needed and asked for by Zelensky, President Zelensky and others. And that is exactly the reason why. That could mean, if there is a clash, if you protect an airspace, you have to perhaps fight against aircrafts, and then eventually that could lead to a bigger military conflict between Russia and NATO, the NATO countries. And frankly, no one wants that kind of situation.
Ambassador Gräns, and this is perhaps to ask about your thoughts. The Social Democrats, the biggest party in Parliament who form minority government, they've, rejected, or rather, calls to join NATO. It will be a big task convincing them, yes, with the decision that Sweden takes eventually to joining the alliance of NATO, wouldn't it?
Well, as you know, the history, I think neutrality and non-alignment has been very important, not least for the Social Democrats in Sweden. But on the other hand, we have the opposition parties, the Conservatives and the Liberals. They have been promoting Swedish NATO membership for a long time. But now we can see discussions within two big parties, the Social Democrats that you mentioned, but also the Sweden Democrats, the third biggest party in Sweden. They were very reluctant, or have been actually against NATO membership. But in both these two big parties, there are discussions going on, and it's sometimes difficult for me, being in Nigeria, to follow, because it's so quick. You know, the developments are so very rapid. But we will see in the end, as Minister Hultqvist said, what the decision will be before summer.
And the decision from Finland as well, as both countries decide to take these decisions together. Ambassador Carl Michael Gräns, thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you so much for inviting.
And so Finland, on the other hand, says it must be prepared for all kinds of actions from Russia should it decide to join NATO. The country's Prime Minister Sanna Marin earlier today said Finland would make a decision whether to apply to join NATO over the next few weeks. She was speaking at a press conference alongside her Swedish counterpart. Ms. Marin said it would be a good thing if the two countries take similar security choices in the future along a similar timetable. Finland and Sweden are close partners with NATO but have shied away from joining the 30-member alliance founded in 1949 to counter the Soviet Union during the Cold War.
But there are different perspectives to apply NATO membership or not to apply, and we have to analyze all of these very carefully, as Magdalena said, and we will have the discussions within the Finnish parliament upcoming weeks. But I think our process will be quite fast. It will happen in weeks, as I mentioned.
I think you really must analyze the new situation, do it very seriously, think about the consequences, the pros and cons of all potential ways forward, and I think you have to be very serious in this work. This is exactly where we are right now. Finland just made their redogörelse, and we are now having the discussions with the parties in the Swedish parliament. We also have a dialogue within my party. I wanted to have this, take this serious situation very seriously, and then we make a decision. No, I'm saying we have to analyze the situation to see what is best for Sweden's security, for the Swedish people in this new situation. And you shouldn't rush into that. You should make it very seriously. That is how I work as the Swedish Prime Minister.
Still ahead on the program.